Broadsword calling Danny Boy. Broadsword calling Danny Boy. Over.
Okay. Sorry, I'm a bit out of breath. I've literally just come from a virtual gym.
He's been carrying his swag up the staircase.
Yeah, because Wargamers don't do gym, Guy.
I do gym. Thank you. I was doing burpees about 15 minutes ago.
You just drink flat beer, Guy.
Recording in progress.
Hello and welcome to another episode of War Games, Soldiers and Strategy, the podcast. Joining me as ever is Guy Bowers, Yash Brotage, Mark Backhouse, and I'm Angus Wallace. I think in our last episode we touched upon range as a concept on the tabletop and how that affected distance units can fire and how difficult it might be to hit a target. Well, we thought we'd follow that idea up in this episode.
And it was so upsetting, that idea, that it took us a month and we completely forgot to record a podcast last month, didn't we?
Did we?
Or was it May?
No, we did one.
No, it was the one before. You forgot. The time passes. So
yeah,
quick,
I know.
Just keep up yourself.
Never mind.
Yeah, we're up to it. Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting topic anyway. Or it's going to be certainly one for debate.
Before we get to the main feature, shall we go over to the newsroom at Guy's Gaff?
So, first out of the bag, and recently arrived, and definitely worth a mention. It's not a game, because I know we normally do games on the podcast. But I thought it was going to be good if we did a shout out to Fireforge and their Byzantine cavalry. They sent me some samples through, and yes, they're very nice.
What cavalry are they, Guy? What period of Byzantine?
It's oh god, you're going to make me pronounce stuff, aren't you? The early Middle Ages. I wrote down everything except for what period the bloody cavalry was. I even looked it up. Mark, I absolutely hate you.
Yeah, just say the Romans, Guy. I mean, they're just Romans.
No. It's the Comnenian army. There you go.
That's Middle Ages anyway. It's not my thing.
Yeah, 11th century. That's what we need to hear. Thank you, Guy.
Well, you can probably use them for a bit earlier as well because of the shield designs, but I'll get into that. So, thankfully, I didn't get Jasper correcting my pronunciation, which is a first on this podcast. So, anyway, Byzantine cavalry. They have 3 different sets. The first set is cataphracts, which, surprise, surprise, come with really long poles, kondos, and barded horses. You get a choice of shields between teardrop shields and some rather nifty circular embossed shields. Second up is the horse archers, which, funny enough, is armoured men on horses with bows. The horses are standard horses, but they can be built as half-bodied horses. And then to round them all off, we have, here we go, let's see if I can pronounce this correctly, the Corsores, which basically comes from the Latin for raider. Basically, these guys can be built as half-barded or with standard horses. They're basically sort of lighter equipped cavalry. You can build them as half-barded or as standard. And the horse frame comes with options for either a barded head or an unbarded head. So that's kind of cool. I've yet to put them together because I've literally just come in. But yeah, I'm going to look forward to having a good look at these. The horses are easy enough to put together. It's left side, right side, tail, plus head of your choice. And if you want to add in the half-barding, you can do. The riders are slightly more complex. You get the pair of legs, you stick together, stick a torso on, stick the arms of your choice, and then stick a head on. A choice of shields between round and teardrop. So I presume the round are for the earlier Byzantines and the teardrop are for the later Byzantines. They also do separate embossed shields. They do a nice set of Chivot shields, which are probably going to be best for the infantry they do. Because, of course, I should say they do plastic spearmen and plastic auxiliary infantry. And they've also got a nice teardrop shield with a crucifix on it. So there we are, Fireforge. And yeah, actually they are very cool. Next, we have ce13ede883ba4eadb3bbff2632d743b6. Fantasy. I only touched on it briefly last time, and I thought that was a bit unfair. The game is by Crooked Dice and Edge Hill University Press. Regular listeners to the podcast will, of course, remember we did an interview with Carl and the guys and gals from the university. I think it was about 3 issues ago. The artwork is really cool. Reminded me very much of the old 80s artwork. And we are going to do a Let's Play for the magazine. But beforehand, we have to do some very important research before we start attempting the Let's Play. Yes, we're going to have to get out a copy of Qual, Xena Warrior Princess, Series 2 and 3 particularly, and of course, Hawk the Slayer.
So the 17ede Fantasy, that's not just a rule book, is it? Is it a box?
Well, yeah, it's a whole box. And a very impressive one. Yeah, I mean, it comes with, and it's the first time I've seen this, colour MDF templates. So there's various spell effects and also various conditions your characters can get into. Well, they're all provided in some rather nifty MDF tokens. Those who are familiar with 7TV pretty much know the format. For those of you who don't, basically each side has a number of points to buy stars and co-stars. So you could, for example, have a Xena Warrior Princess lookalike in the rules called a Divine Mortal, and a Geralta of Rivia. Okay, it's a monster hunter because of copyright. So they could team up against a malevolent sorceress and her gargoyle minions, or lots of other different bits and pieces. So basically, you've got a good guy deck of cards and a bad guy deck of cards, and there's a lot of cards. It covers pretty much all the fantasy tropes I could think of. I didn't see Memoir in there, but that was about the only one which was missing, because somebody else was in there. You also have neutral extras, which both sides can purchase, sort of like NPCs. Things like healers, assassins, or, a unicorn, which just happens to be wandering by. Yes, these are cool. Like they do, yes. The magics particularly impressed me because they all came with their individual books. There's 6 grimoires, or little, I know, my fellow podcasts can see them, but you guys can't.
Oh, they're very cool. They're like passport, slightly smaller than passport-sized booklets.
Are they blue or are they red?
They are brown and grey, and there's a dark blue one there. So and also a nice red one as well. That's the Infernal Folio.
You must have a huge letterbox guy to get that through it. Or do they just leave it to the tradesman's entrance?
Well, the servant deals with that, don't you know? Yes. I say, James. Yes, sir. Has anything arrived today? Yes, sir. The usual sack, sir. What I also liked is you have a guide to basically change the genre of your game. So you can have an epic fantasy, a folktale fantasy, a historical fantasy, a mythic fantasy, a pen and paper fantasy, and of course, sword and sorcery. So you can tailor your campaign and the encounters and the events that happen, and also the scenarios and settings you play by basically choosing a particular genre to play. There are 3 books, which reminds me very much of D&D. That's the Director's Guide, the Producer's Guide, and the Casting Guide. And yes, altogether, we're really looking forward to giving this a bash. It's very much going to be, sword and sorcery and lots of fun, I'm sure.
I'll get ready my fur bikini in preparation. Good.
Mark, you'll be more than welcome to join us. Yes. I have to get out the latex weapons and start.
Thank God, it's Monday. Jesus, we have to do go a whole week with these images.
Well, I used to be a LARPer until lockdown happened. So I do have the occasional foam Nadachi in a cupboard.
Unfortunately, the photos are on Instagram.
What the listeners can't see is with Guy's white hair, he looks nothing like Gerald of Rivia.
Thank you.
But when he's done working out after this summer, he will.
No, unfortunately, my nickname with my goth friends is Gandalf.
So moving swiftly on, what else have we got there?
Oh, yeah, finally. Yes, this is one I should have reviewed last time. It's by Bonza Games, and it's called Delta 10. It is a modern tactical skirmish game with 6 models aside. So I'm not too sure how that fits on our magical chart of skirmishiness, because, of course, a skirmish game could be whatever somebody says it is, really. Anything from 1 to 50 figures, really. 6 figures aside. You also get some rather nifty models, which, again, there's no point showing you, but the models are really nice. Modern US and modern Soviet Special Forces. I really need to have a decent read. This is going to become a thing, isn't it? Something arrives. I haven't read it properly because I was too busy doing the other one. And then I'll have to give it a decent review next time.
I'm not sure I've played such a small game. I might have done. How do they play these really small games?
You've played Forager, haven't you, Angus?
No, I own Forager, and I buy Kickstarter. I've never actually played it. I paid all the figures up.
So the trouble is I end up playing all sorts of games. I didn't actually review Forager. That was my friend Owen.
How well do these tiny small games play? Are they quite quick, fast fun?
It all depends upon the mechanism of the game, really. I mean, generally, yes. Although, mind you, I've known some skirmish games with some people being very sort of tactical and sneaky, which take just as long as your standard battle game.
With only 6 figures per side, you've not got a lot of opportunity. You take a few casualties and it's kind of all over.
Well, in this, you have a deck of wound cards. So the first shot isn't necessarily going to kill you unless your opponent's very lucky. Again, it's a very tricky thing with skirmish games not to be too bogged down. Otherwise, it just ends up in a bun fight. Well, by bun, I mean 5.56 millimeter bullets going each way. But basically, both sides hunker down and neither side gets on with it. So I think such things need to be very much narrative drawn. You need to have a good mission. So yes, Delta 10 by Bonza Games. Worth a look. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the news. We have had no ospreys or a pile of stuff in. So yes,
amazing. All quiet, not on the West Front, but at Bowers Towers. So on to the main feature. Now, if we're going to be discussing range as a concept, let's cut to the chase. Does any discussion on range boil down to game versus simulation?
Very good. Yes, because this is, of course, the big question mark. And I blame second edition 40K. I really do. That's when we stepped out from going into a nice graded system of shooting into you need a 4+, and a las gun stops at 24 inches.
Didn't the original 40K have quite restricted ranges on as well?
It did.
But it did have a long range.
Yeah, I've probably not played it since about 1990.
So what was long range then? Was that the rest of the table, Guy?
No, actually, I think it was pretty much short range was 12 inches and up to long range was up to 20.
All right, so exactly the same length. You've just called it long range. It's like turning up to 11 and making it louder than 10, isn't it?
Well, you see, yes and no, because here's the thing. As Angus said, it's a matter of simulation versus game. And the question is where do we go? Do we go ultra simulation? Well, you do that on computer games all the time when you're playing. Okay, I don't happen to play Call of Duty, but I know other people who do play Call of Duty.
Some of my best friends.
Actually, very few of my friends play Call of Duty. Actually, no. I know a guy called Chuckles who plays Call of Duty. So, if you ever listen to this podcast? Yeah. So, yeah, cut a long story short, if you want the ultra stuff, you can get a computer to do it for you.
See, I'm quite a big fan of the fact that, if you've got a rifle, provided the table's a regular kind of 6x4 table, a rifle should be able to shoot all the way across at 28mm. And it just takes, all right, if you've got a pistol, you've got to add some sort of range in potentially because it will get less accurate. But, it just seems clean and simple and move on. This whole nonsense about, well, it's only got this range or that range. If you're going to make
it's the balance, you see, that's what you're talking about. Because you said, why shouldn't a rifle be able to hit anybody on the table? Well, yeah, I would agree potentially with that. But if we're talking realistically speaking, then what sort of range do you think you could hit somebody with a rifle?
Well, it depends on the scale of the table. I would have thought all the way across the 6x4.
Depends on It's the size of the scale of the game. Then are we talking 28 mil? So
should we just stick with 28 mil? Because otherwise it'll get confusing as we all talk.
I think we also need to focus on the style of game as well, because if we're looking at a one-to-one sort of big skirmish game, then the length of the table's reasonable. But of course, if you're looking at a 28 mil company size game, then you've maybe got to scale things down. You're maybe not representing one figure as one person, are you? So if we're talking a one-to-one scale skirmish game with a platoon or so aside, the bolt actions and the chain of commands, then probably realistically you could shoot across the table and have a chance of hitting something, or at least getting so blooming close that the person's going to be laying on the floor and diving in cover and generally not doing anything.
Well, you see, this is the thing. If you look at real life, then you look at, for example, let's just take the Lee Enfield rifle. The Enfield rifle is sighted for 2,000 yards. So practically, with a Lee Enfield, how far do you think you could shoot? And that's entirely down to what you're shooting at. The reason why the Lee Enfield is sighted to 2,000 yards is if you're firing, for example, at a whole bunch of a mass of men. A mass of men, you can actually volley fire and aim at 1,500 to 2,000 yards and potentially hit something. So you're taking the extreme range of the rifle. Well, that's what they were sighted for, and that's what they're designed for, Jasper.
Yeah, but there's a reason that for the Sturmgewehr, the Kurz bullet was, or the cartridge was developed, which I think was developed for 250, 300 meters.
Yes. Now you see, here we come to the crux of the matter. The crux of the matter is what is the effective range of a rifle? And the answer is, I will go by one of the, I think it was the Italians and the Italian rifle, which actually invented the first flip sights for 100 meters and 300 meters, because that was the practical range which you're going to be able to hit at maximum a skirmishing man at. It's great having these nice, large marching columns of infantry, but of course, tactics changed. And, it's a one thing firing at a nice marching column of people. It's another thing entirely if you are cold, tired, in a trench, haven't slept for 24 hours, taking a quick snapshot at a guy who's 200-300 meters away, who's also cold and tired in his trench.
But it's also going to depend a little bit on what one firing dice is meant to represent, though, isn't it? Because if a firing dice is meant to be a single shot, then maybe that's the case. But maybe with the Lee Enfield, when you fire in a game of bolt action, could that not represent not a single shot, but in fact actually a person spending 5, 10 seconds, 20 seconds of firing, and maybe they're firing off 5 or 10 rounds in the direction.
And it's also usually not represents one guy, but a number of guys.
Or even a moment aiming.
Well, you see, here's the big cheat in wargaming. We have abandoned the idea of ground scale, and instead we've got sort of like a feeling of how things work. So instead of going, okay, my figure is 28 millimeters tall, that represents 1.5 meters. Okay, he's a bit short. And then working out the ground scale like that, that's entirely impractical, because this could be one person. This could be, as you said, Mark, 20 people. So we kind of we fudge things. So instead, this is my entire argument about simulation versus game. We want a little bit of this simulation because we do want our submachine guns and our pistols to be of a shorter range than the rifle. But we also have got to basically make it playable on the table. So this is why we are enclosed in our 6x4. So we've got to have some, I think it's the perception that what we see on the tabletop could happen. I'm not going to say it's realistic. I'm going to say it just feels right.
It does. It does make a very good argument for me, because I'll end up agreeing with you. So maybe I should just play devil's advocate here. So do you think then we should be going back to something which is purely game-based then, and ignoring the real history here, do you think, and just saying actually...
Absolutely not, because that's where you end up with things like Age of Sigmar. Again, it's a fantasy game.
I thought you were going to say that's where you end up with bolt action.
No. You see, bolt action, you see, is actually something which I'd like to come back to, because I would actually argue that bolt action is a compromise. So, okay, I disagree with the fact that your rifles stop at 24 inches and what have you. But, you're trying to sort of like squeeze a whole pile of things, including mortars, which you'd never see on the table, howitzers, which you'd never see on the table, tanks, which you'd rarely see on the table. But it comes down to wargamers like their toys. Wargamers like tanks. Wargamers like guns. And so they want them on the table. And so, therefore, the ranges in bolt action are distorted to let you play with all the toys.
So it's similar to Flames of War, where I've heard that explained once, that they sort of have what they call it, logarithmic scale of ranges, so that when your artillery is firing at the enemy across the table, then you're taking maybe 3 feet, but it represents 3,000 yards. And when it's a tank firing from 12 inches away, it represents 500 meters. And when the infantry is firing at 12 inches or 8 inches or whatever, it represents 150 meters.
Well, I suppose it was what works.
So the ground scale, then, the table is the thing that's changing then, isn't it? Which is interesting, rather than, right, you're seeing that in a different way. That's a different way of seeing it all, which is quite clever, really. Maybe we're seeing the games entirely wrongly then.
But I don't know. I mean, is it right or wrong? I'm not too sure. It's just a different way of playing. So, Flames of War on bolt action, they do distort ranges and they do allow stuff which you'd otherwise not see.
But which is better, though, Guy? Which is better? Is it actually a better game by distorting it like that? Or actually, are we just really, really messing around with reality here? Is this becoming just a game, not a war game? Or if actually, is a possible danger that we end up doing war and there's not a fun game inside it because it's too brutal, or it's too it's too realistic? Is there a danger of going that way too far?
I think we're getting into a whole different debate there, Mark. But
well, yeah, because I mean, as far as we could go also into lethality and also into I've forgotten who it was now. Men Against Fire, and I've forgotten the name of the author, where he basically argued that most people just keep their heads down and not actually do much.
Marshall, SLA Marshall.
SLA Marshall, thank you.
Which has largely been debunked.
Well, okay, well, yes and no. Because, again, you look at the different theories, and then you, basically make up your own mind. So, yeah.
No, it has largely been debunked.
Yeah, it was just apocryphal.
Actually, that part anyway, the firing part. I think he's considered to be very good on other things, but
even so, the amount of rounds you put around towards the enemy and the amount of enemy you actually hit, you're going to get 1 bullet, 1 kill every single time. In fact, it's going to be more like 200,000 bullets to 1 kill, going by the old Vietnam statistic.
Okay, could you possibly argue that being a bit more loose with the range actually, whilst offering more of an idea of realism, also tidies up the game by taking a factor out? Something you have to worry about less if this is especially if you think about World War II or the more modern games with more modern rifles rather than black powder, where range is possibly got there is an argument for shorter ranges in something like black powder, but if you're taking out a factor that you don't have to worry about to speed the game up.
Possibly. I mean, the trouble is you can go too far the other way because you need to have. I mean, for me, there has to be some sort of historical element. As soon as you don't have to worry about your flanks, I get worried. As soon as you start not worrying about ranges, because if you're firing at a longer range, you should have some sort of penalty.
That could be just a modifier to hit.
It could be just a hit to modify. Yeah, quite happy with that. But that element has to be in the game.
It does add a strange factor when you realise that if you've been playing bolt action, you suddenly go to chain of command, you suddenly realise you could be hit at any point. If they've got a line of sight, you suddenly start. It does make you think, rather than having to worry about, well, I'm just out of range, so I can move that here. It changes your game quite drastically.
In fairness, in chain of command, though, the game table is meant to represent about is meant to be about 400 metres squared or something like that, isn't it? 500 metres by 300 metres or whatever it is.
No, slightly smaller, I think, but yeah.
Even smaller than that, is it? So, I mean, you're looking at a very small representation of what the ground scale is meant to be inside it. And therefore, the idea that you can shoot across that is eminently plausible inside that sort of range there of maybe a few hundred metres that, a good marksman might get a lucky hit or at least do enough to pin people.
I've just done a very cheap Google search on effective range of a rifle, and it claimed, that 400 meters for the M16 was what was considered to be an effective range. Now, I appreciate that was a search that's probably not very well referenced. So,
well, this is where we discuss maximum effective range. Okay, very briefly. Maximum effective range is the maximum range that a rifle is likely to possibly hit the enemy or suppress the enemy. So, for example, you'll find if you look up the Minimi, which uses the same round as the M16, the Minimi has a slightly longer effective range. But that's because it's firing more bullets and it's more likely to get... basically, when a machine gun lays down fire, it generally lays down fire in a circle. So it's got a greater suppression ability. So you'll find that the Minimi has a slightly longer maximum effective range. But realistically speaking, you're looking at 300 meters / 300 yards. In black powder era, you were lucky if you could hit somebody at 50 yards. 100 yards would be about it for the musket ball. With your rifled gun all the way through, then yes. A proper bolt action rifle would give you a bit more range if you were trained. You'd be looking at, say, 200-300 meters if you're lucky. If you're doing suppression, then yeah, perhaps you can push it to 4.
But going back to what we were talking about, platoon-sized games, they would fall easily within that framework.
Yeah. Do we have any games out there where long range actually kills the game and stops it being more entertaining? Are there any other games out there where you can't move forward because of the weight of fire is so strong right from the beginning and it kills the game off?
It's definitely a danger, like I was saying with, not that I've played Delta 1-0, so this should not be a criticism of Delta 1-0, but when we're discussing about Delta 1-0, we're saying about how some skirmish games can basically sit to both sides can end up being hunkered down, and then it just basically be turning into a firefight. So there is that danger.
So terrain there, which blocks line of sight, is going to be absolutely critical in a game like that, isn't it? And being able to use that terrain to move. Terrain
should be critical in pretty much all games because I think apart from your large battles in the ancient and medieval period, where people mutually agreed to turn up on a really wide field so they could actually get all their armies in there. Where terrain also definitely played a role. Well, but yeah, with any sort of skirmish game, then yes, terrain is going to be absolutely essential. Whether you're a peltast back 2nd century BC or if you're modern day in Afghanistan. So yeah, I think terrain is absolutely that guy clincher.
So I'm just wondering if terrain there is more important than worrying about the ranges, actually. We should be less fixated on the ranges and worrying about getting those right and more worried about getting the terrain in there. Because the reality is when you walk around, I'm looking out my window now into the street and I can't see 400 metres. I can see to the hedgerow that's at the end of my garden at the moment, which is 4 metres away.
I could see about half a mile.
And regardless of how long my range is, there's always going to be something small and... unless you're in the middle of the flattest bit of steppe land inside the Ukraine or something, or the Western Desert.
Angus said you can see half a mile, but is that completely flat, Angus, or are there trees, or are there walls, or are there dips? And
no, indeed, there's dips, depressions, hills,
dead ground and things out there. Absolutely. So what I'm trying to picture here is it doesn't really matter the size of the range of the guns into the game. What's really important actually more is how the terrain is placed and how that breaks things up. Because our problem is a lot of the skirmish games is often there's not enough terrain. And often we play on a flat table, which misses out these small undulations of the ground, even small dips of, 5 feet there is going to be enough to conceal an advancing infantryman who's crawling forward quite happily. And completely hide them from what's going on. And we very rarely sort of actually cover the ground in such level of detail. I suppose it's hard to do, but it's almost a range a way of reflecting those limitations in our tabletops, which invariably are fairly flat with a few polystyrene contours or whatever inside them. Is that just a simpler mechanism of showing that dead ground and things?
Well, nothing upsets a game more when you realise that you've laid out your board that looks cool, but has a real crippling field of fire somewhere that you never noticed, and it kind of brings the game to a halt if somebody gets at one end of it.
And I wonder if just by limiting the ranges inside games, actually we're getting a better simulation then of how that terrain is going to limit what the soldiers can see on the ground, and also the idea that the enemy soldiers aren't standing up like the actual models are. I think that's always a danger. You get your laser sight and go, look, that man is popped up above the hedgerow. I can see him. I will shoot a tip. He's within 24 inches, bang. Whereas actually, of course, the reality is, that person isn't walking around like he's not got a care in the world and waving his weapon in the air like some 40k hero, with his legs wide apart in some sort of combat battle pose stance. He's hugging the ground, ducking between bits of cover, poking his head out first of a couple of inches before popping his head back in again. And I think maybe the range covers that maybe as an artificial way of simulating the vagaries of line of sight in real battles much better than actually, this idea that you can see for miles and miles and miles, and it's all wonderful. In reality, that just doesn't happen.
You might be able to see, on occasion, you can see for miles and miles and miles, but you certainly can't shoot anything for miles and miles and miles.
If we spill back to a really early podcast with Mel, the terrain tutor, in, oddly, one of the suggestions he brings up when people are thinking about terrain is actually to concentrate terrain towards the centre, because as invariably the centre of the table is where the action happens, and he said, that's where you need to think about putting your terrain, because that's where the action is, and that's where you need to break up your lines of sight to give you, if you're playing a skirmish type game,
give you the tactical choices you need. Yeah, no, that's sage advice, isn't it?
Just as a matter of interest, Guy, when you wrote Black Ops, how did what was the solution you came up with? Because I have played it, but I don't recall.
Well, okay, you did have to make some compromises, but I based it on a reflection on what real weapons would do. So you have your bow action rifle, which is better than your battle rifle and better than your assault rifle, or carbine if you prefer. So yeah, bow action rifle is king as far as the sniper is concerned. Battle rifle, the range is slightly less. Your assault rifle, range slightly less again. And of course, you also have basically your PDWs, personal defense weapons, what we used to call submachine guns. But they're made used by, obviously, heroes in films and also by vehicle crews. So, and of course, your humble pistol. So I basically just said, okay, a gun has, say, a range of X inches. Double that, you've got the long range. Triple that, and you've got your extreme range. And that's it. So, again, keeping it nice and simple, and then having steps to the range.
So could a bolt-action rifle shoot right away across the tabletop?
No, the bolt-action rifle would actually be limited to 36 inches in Black Ops. Yes, while your assault rifle will be more like 27 inches. I think I actually gave... there's some sniper rifles which I think can fire 42 inches. But I'd have to look that up. It's been a while since I went for the weapons table.
On another note, I've been playing around with my ancient rules at the moment, trying to work out how far things should be able to fire with. And as you get smaller and smaller with your figures, it does become a challenge, because what you want to be able to do is get things that look like they fire over a distance. So, for example, formed up units of archers or horse archers, you actually want them to fire at a distance. But of course, when you start looking at the ground scale on it, actually the ground scale is quite small for the sort of units I'm using in my game, and therefore you've got to make. I'm going to go back and support Guy actually and say there's a degree of compromise that's got to be made to create a game that feels like a game. If I wanted to play it as a precise simulation, everything would be pretty much firing at point blank range, because let's face it, archers are going to be firing over 100 meters maybe, maybe 30 meters, probably. Basically, at the scale I'm playing at, basically, it's right in front of you. So I've had to make a few compromises there to sort of represent something that feels right for gamers, and people have sort of gone back and forth, and we've tried different things with it. It's been really interesting trying to work out what something should look like and how it should feel for a gamer, because we're so used to archers firing over long distances. And I was worrying about if I should be bold enough to say, no, everything's point blank. And that's the only thing you can basically fire at in my game. And
what feedback have you had from your play testers over the range of the archers?
It's been all right. They've been positive about it. They like that. But effectively, I've bottled it a little bit and allowed them a little bit longer on the ground scale than they should have. And it's a little bit exaggerated. And I'm ill at ease with that, but at the same time I realise that it's a good compromise for gameplay. So unfortunately I am really backing Guy's compromise city boat here. You're going to laugh at me now and call me a splitter at home at this point in time, a sellout, but these purists will be ripping out my rules and burning them now eventually this, but invariably it's a compromise we've got to make. So I do understand it from a game perspective. And ultimately, we're writing and playing games, aren't we? Rather than, we're not doing a precise simulation. If I wanted to do that, as you say, we'd be running them on a computer simulation system or something like that. There wouldn't we? And I suspect they'd be bloody boring to play as well.
Call of Duty has its followings. I mean, my friend's argument was quite simple. This week he was reviewing a game with tertios. And he was saying, well, realistically, your tertio is like, a couple of 100 yards or whatever, and it's only able to fire, maybe effectively 50, 100 yards. So it's almost, as you said, Mark, point blank. Therefore, he was arguing that it should be part of melee, because effectively you get close, either both sides are going to shoot each other, or effectively they're in close combat. Because if that's large scale, then, the size of the units.
Yeah, and in fairness, we sort of mentioned this a little bit a while ago when we talked about the Twilight the Sun King rules the other week, didn't we? And about Nick Dorrell's system there, which combines the shooting and melee together, and basically took morale checks rather than a shooting roll or a combat roll. And I think just units took morale checks as they got close to the enemy, representing them being shot at and that kind of thing, which I thought was really interesting. So. I think anything that experiments with these things is commendable, and I think that's a really innovative sort of way of looking at it. But the problem is most gamers like their old systems, don't they? They like what they're used to a little bit. We like that roll of 4+. We like that. When I say we like that 6-inch movement, well, you know what I mean. That sort of that standard sort of distance. So you're suddenly shocked if a unit of infantry suddenly moved 3 foot across the table. That'd be outrageous for many gamers, wouldn't it? So we've got to, I suppose, go with a few conservative ideas that are going to keep people happy. But I think it's really exciting that we can innovate and play around with some of these ideas like this. I think that's a really good thing. So long may that continue. There might be another wonderful holy grail out there that we've missed all along that's right in front of our eyes. So keep experimenting.
Well, that seems like a good point to move on to. What have we been up to? What has anyone been up to? Who wants to start? What have you been up to? Guy.
Right, thank you. I get to go first. Yay. I've been messing around with instant colour.
Oh, these are the cheap, I don't want to say cheap, sorry. These are the alternative contrast paints.
Yeah. Well, I picked up mine from M&C Painting. Are
they cheaper?
Well, basically I paid, 24 quid for 8 paints. So, yeah, I think they're, a bit cheaper than the Games Workshop stuff.
Still quite hefty, aren't they?
Yeah, well, relatively, although I'm very happy with the results. The Citadel ones tend to be very thick, almost like sort of syrupy. These instant colour ones are more like a wash. So I've been playing around. I've been doing some, basically some partisans and also some, American Civil War. And that is rubbish.
Sorry, Guy is showing this to us on his camera here for people listening at home. Yeah, nice. Yeah.
But suffice to say, I'm very happy with the results. I don't know why. I basically was going for the colours and I thought, that would actually do very nice for American Civil War Union troops. So I've actually been painting up, for some bizarre reason, American Civil War Union troops. You can't see squat on my camera. I'll have to take some decent pictures and stick them up on Instagram. But yeah, I mean, they are lighter than, and not as heavy as a Citadel contrast. I do like that because they're more controllable in the contrast. I think people who are expecting this sort of one coat contrast aren't going to be happy, because once or twice with the lighter colours I've had to go over them again. But that's only a minor thing of just touching up one or two bits. On the other hand, I find I've got a lot more control with these instant colour ones. So, and also, yes, I can see myself using both quite happily.
So what purpose would you use them for? I mean, they're not like as heavy in one cover type contrast paints. So do you use them as do you use them to change the shade of something, or? Well,
you see, the beautiful thing is I can use them for both. If I want to do a covering like I've done with the Union troops, I've managed to do one coat. I should really do the colours, shouldn't I? So I've been using Removed Mana for the Union jackets, and I've been using Magic Blue for the trousers, and been using Phoenix Feather for the faces. I do like the flesh colours on the instant colour, and I think actually they're slightly superior to the Citadel ones. However, Citadel wins hands down because the instant colour ones, flesh-wise, don't have a decent darker shade. It's okay for white Caucasians, but I would have liked something which was Southern European or African shades. So, mind you, anything too dark also Citadel fails on, so then you have to mess about to get the right colour. So I would have liked a lot more different flesh shades rather than the sort of standard pale face.
Could you start off with a slightly darker base coat though on the flesh and paint it like a sort of a light brown, and then give it a sort of a different coat and that over the top of it? Would that change it? I'm
experimenting with that. I mean, effectively, the obvious challenge with any sort of contrast is if you have a shading colour which is darker than the contrast, they just don't work. So you've got to go from a white. But interestingly enough, instant colour have a white primer, a light grey primer, and a light blue grey primer. So I'm going to have to get some of that and start experimenting. And effectively, I mean, there's 48 paints in the range. Added to the 36 the Citadel do. All of a sudden, my contrast experiments have just gone exponentially bigger.
I think you need to report on the blog, so you can show people some decent pictures.
I'm getting a little bit worried, though, about next year's analog painting challenge already, though. I don't know about you. After this year's embarrassing defeat at the hands of the Bowers and his sneaky, I'll reveal it all at the last minute.
Given that this guy took me sort of like, okay, there's assembly time as well, but, and also spray time. But given that sort of guy took me about sort of 20 minutes to knock out, and he's a pretty decent artilleryman, yes.
So that's 20 minutes. So how much time do you have to paint every day, guys?
Well, yeah, it all depends how busy I am with the magazine.
So if you have on average an hour and a half, let's say an hour and 40 minutes, so then you're painting 5 figures a day times 90 days, 450 times 5 points. I think we need to scale Guy up to about 2,500. Was it 2250?
I think so. Yeah. He should be in first place, shouldn't he?
Right. Okay. He's just trying to kill me. That's what it is.
It's an hour and a half. I mean, basically, Guy. Come on, you can do it.
What about you, Angus? What have you been doing?
I actually haven't been doing anything. I've been landscaping my garden, but what I have accidentally purchased after you banging on about canvas eagles for ages, Mark, I've gone and purchased Wings of Glory.
Wings of Glory. Cool.
Even though I've painted the models for canvas eagles. I've got the tokens all cut out to play it. I was daydreaming on Amazon the other day, and I noticed they had a dual pack for Wings of Glory on for £12, including postage, I think it was. So I snapped it up. So I've got Wings of Glory. I thought it was a bit more blingy to try and give my daughter a game over the summer holidays. So I think for £12 you can't really go wrong, because they're usually ridiculously expensive. I think is Wings of Glory's.
So how many planes are in a dual pack?
Two.
Oh,
Two.
right, okay.
Yeah. There's all the bits and bats in with it, so you could have a pretty basic game, but it's enough to get her to dip a toe in the water. But I thought that was good value. Consider, as I said, usually they're 25 quid, so I don't quite know why it was on so cheap. But that's Wings of Glory, isn't it? It's also their manufacturing seems to be boom and bust, and when they've got nothing about, all the prices go through the roof, and then suddenly things become available again, and I can never quite work out what's going on with it. So that's the only thing. I haven't actually managed to crack the cellophane. I was hoping to do it this weekend, but we got distracted.
What about you then, Jasper? I saw a nice game of Chain of Command or something.
Yeah, we had more fun with Chain of Command, but the Americans are slowly pushing my Germans back, despite my attempts to hold them up. That's right. I painted 2 martyrs like a maniac for the game, and then they couldn't hit an elephant. They're not a broadside of the barn. Oh, actually, they hit. That was the point. They hit every time, and then Pack 75s didn't want to go through the Shermans. So clearly the ammunition was faulty. And since then, I've been sort of playing around with making some more terrain bits, but I haven't actually finished anything. It's been one of those days where you go, I played it with a little bit of this and start some of that, and then nothing happens. But that's okay. I mean, it's probably because social life is slowly starting again, so that has to happen too. But hopefully we'll have another game in a week or two and see if we can win some.
Cool. Mark, how about you?
Yeah, I've been back down the club again, which is nice. And I've been continuing to do online games as well. Down the club, what have we been playing? Mostly, play testing more stuff in my game there. We were doing some Spartacus battles the other week. That was quite good fun. I got an absolute thrashing from my mate Ian, who was new to the game the other week as well. I was playing Ghouls. That was always embarrassing and good fun. And online, we've done a few historical scenarios. We played Second Cremona. And then it all starts in darkness, that one there. So there's loads of chaos and complete confusion as the armies march forward and bump into each other, or don't, as the case might be.
Oh, do you have something in there for $3 to greet the sun?
Yeah, saluting the sun. Yeah, they can salute the sun once daybreak happens and cause a setback to the
scare the enemy. Yeah,
back to the Vitellan side. Yeah, the Vitellans did quite well in that one there to begin with, and then in the end, Vespasian's troops and in fact that famous salute to the sun helped to win it in the special rules. So that was quite a tight fought one and an interesting one. And then we did a game of Muthul River from 109 BC, which is the Jugurthine War. So Jugurtha sort of ambushing a column of Roman troops as they're heading down to plant their camp next door to the river itself for fresh water supply. And it's also got it's Marius inside it, isn't it? It's one of the sub-commanders on the Roman side. It's one of his first ones in which he's sort of developing his skills as a.
He appears, yeah.
Yeah, he's not actually leading the army at that point there, but that was a really interesting one. We played the Numidians a few times, and they were quite a different, tricky prospect for the Romans, and the Romans were really dragged out all over the place trying to protect their flank, and got completely overwhelmed at one flank, and then were crushing their way through the Numidian infantry.
It should take about 5 years for the Romans to win.
Well, it was interesting in that normally the game is won by units routing. At some point, you have disasters that take place in your army where a legion breaks through another enemy unit, or a legion runs away or something, or a general dies. But in this battle here, it was all a series of setbacks, and it started a slow of withering down of fire and just taking heavy casualties. And in the end, the Romans were beaten, which was nice to see. So we really enjoyed that. And also at the club, I managed to get a week off this week on Thursday, and I was able to play a game of Sharp Practice, which was a right hoot. And we did a 7 years war raid into a village, and then we're trying to pick up a French spy and rescue her. Her name was the Black Snail. And true to form, every time we tried to move her, she kept rolling terrible movement dice and was very slow. But yeah, it was a good fun game. We introduced some new gamers to it who came down the club. We were very enthusiastic and a good laugh. And most of the game involved picking out random events and like being attacked by hordes of geese and things like that there at key moments, and wild boars and beehives, which got terrified by the sound of gunfire and started swarming at them and stinging people and stuff. It was pretty stupid, really, but good fun and a good way to remember the rules. We haven't played them well, so that was a hoot as well. So we enjoyed that. Yeah, good stuff.
You're very busy.
Lots of gaming. Yeah, I'm gaming twice a week, whether I like it or not.
Well, I think that's. Oh, is that all for us? Well, is that all for us? Has the magazine? Has the latest magazine just dropped?
It has dropped digitally. The printer is still working on things. It's a bit hard to time the magazine digitally and print version at the moment.
And what's the latest
because of
issue?
COVID and crap things. Issue 115 is currently still on pre-order.
It's innovations in the American Civil War, both tactically and with technology.
Very good. And if someone wants to pick up the digital copy?
Well, they can always go to www.wssmagazine.com.
Where ideally they could also subscribe to the paper copy and get that.
Yep, you can do both.
When it rolls off the printing presses. Hot off the Caravanserai printing presses.
Oh, not that big yet. We have our own presses. That would be a thing.
Yeah, well, all in time. All in time.
Ambition is a good thing. Yeah, that's true.
Yes. I need to get to Jasper a white cat.
No. Not a cat person. Allergies, not a good idea.
Oh, okay. How about a bald cat then? One of those Devon Rexes.
I'm a dog person, guy. You know that.
Okay, but you can't really go, good evening, Mr. Bond.
No, that's because I say, good evening, Mr. Bowers.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bowers. I expect you to finish the magazine.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Absolutely.
See you later.
True story.
Okay, keep gaming.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.